Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. Now I had the intention of doing some more videos on the Pistis Sophia and starting that tonight, but I've had some technical difficulties with my editing software, so I'm going to do a simpler video this time around. The Pistis Sophia stuff is on its way though, but tonight I want to talk about astrology and give some of my thoughts on astrology, and in particular talk about some of the most recent kind of astrological phenomena that have occurred and what the implications of those are. So, astrology, it's come to mind recently for me as we've entered a new period with the positioning of Pluto in the night sky. The planet Pluto, one of these outer planets that has a very large orbit, a very wide orbit, as it's further away from the Sun than the Earth or indeed any of the inner planets. It takes much longer for Pluto to travel around the Sun. And so Pluto can enter a new sign and it affects an entire generation of people or an entire period of history rather than just a year or so or a few months. And so Pluto has once again changed to a different sign, moved into a new sign, and that's the sign of Aquarius. Pluto moved into Aquarius around the 22nd or 23rd of January this year, and there's been people commenting about that, making content about that quite a bit. So what does this mean, that Pluto is now in Aquarius? Well, many people have pointed out the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius was 1776, thereabouts. It entered Aquarius. It was the same time as all of these revolutions were happening in America as well as in Europe, particularly the French Revolution. And people have interpreted this as the kind of the revolutionary kind of energy of Aquarius being combined with the transformative radical power of Pluto, which led to systems of the established order being utterly turned upside down by this powerful combination of energies. And people have speculated that over the next 20 years that Pluto is in Aquarius, starting from quite recently, that we can expect to see more radical transformations in society. One can only hope. And this alignment can have personal effects on people's personal life as well. It can bring up things from the unconscious that we've been suppressing. It can bring to light family secrets that have been kept hidden for a long time. For me, this is kind of relevant because of my own research into my own family. Over the past few years, I've got quite a bit into genealogy. And, it happened during COVID that this interest developed. As with many people, I had a lot of free time on my hands during that lockdown period, and I developed, everybody developed different weird obsessions. Mine was genealogy. And I've been trying to trace my own family history, and I got to a point in that exercise and no further, and I employed a professional genealogist, and now some results are starting to come through, helping me to understand things about my heritage that I didn't know before. So this could be a manifestation of the Pluto and Aquarius energy of, uncovering hidden secrets. And Pluto does that at the best of times. But I think that energy is going to be particularly strong in my life for the next 20 years personally, because my sun sign is Aquarius. I also have Taurus rising, another fixed sign, and in my birth chart, Pluto is situated in Scorpio, where Pluto's power is enhanced. So I'm expecting this planetary, not alignment, but this planetary positioning to have quite an effect on my life. The Pluto in Aquarius phenomenon can also be very good for people on the spiritual path. It can be, people can really use that energy as an opportunity to fast track their spiritual growth, and it can be a good period for sharing spiritual knowledge. So those two things, as I am on this path and I have this channel, make me very excited. Perhaps there'll be some positive impact there. And people say that it's a foreshadowing of the transition to the Aquarian age. One can hope that there's certainly enough darkness and despair in the world. It would be nice if we get a glimpse at what lies on the other side of that. Maybe we'll see that, who knows. But things certainly need to be turned on their head before that can happen. And if nothing else, Pluto in Aquarius is certainly considered a herald of that. But this could also be an auspicious year coming up, because we're on the verge of the Chinese New Year, which begins on the 10th of February, and it's the year of the dragon, which is considered quite an auspicious sign. So, that's what Chinese astrology says about the year ahead, although I don't know too much about Chinese astrology versus Western astrology. So those are some of the interesting little astrological events, or markers, you could say, that are in this immediate time period that we're in now. And so I've been thinking about all this, and I've been thinking about, well, what do I really think about astrology? Do I believe in it? Do I think that there's any merit to it? And I'm kind of in two minds about astrology. I've always had this kind of this tension, or these contradictory ideas about astrology in my mind. On the one hand, I think that it's just quite far-fetched. This idea that the planets are emitting these kinds of, rays of energy that are influencing people, and somehow the constellations of the zodiac have the characteristics that are attributed to them by one particular culture, and are given attributes of some sort of shape that isn't necessarily obvious. You could trace just about anything from the stars, and yet we have these set constellations with set meanings. Why should the universe that has existed for billions of years have this objective reality behind it of, pandering to a particular set of cultural symbols, unless of course they came up with those symbols because of the influence of those stars. But then, is that the same across all cultures? There's probably some differences. So then how could astrology be true? And there's no scientific basis for any, we know a lot of the kinds of energy that's moving around the universe, and emitted by different heavenly bodies, and there's not really any evidence that the planets exert the influence that astrology, taken literally, seems to say that they do. So I've always had that opinion in my mind about astrology. But then, on the other hand, it describes things. It describes people's personality traits, and it seems to be, at least in my experience, a very good predictor of things. So for myself, you know, I'm quite familiar with what my natal chart says. And I had my astrological chart read for the first time when I was 18, and it had a profound impact on me. And everything that the person who read it told me was with pinpoint accuracy describing who I am as a person, and even predicted, you know, some of the things that would go on to happen in my life. That's one of the reasons why I knew that I would be a spiritual teacher one day, and that I would begin that process around age 30. And that turned out to be true, but it's all in the placement of the planets in my chart. And you could say that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that somebody told me that this would be something that happened in my life, and so I subconsciously took steps towards making that a reality in my life. But still, I mean, it did happen quite suddenly. I wasn't, you know, even a year before I began this channel, I didn't think that I was prepared, you know, to become a spiritual teacher, to begin teaching people. I thought that I was supposed to get a career somewhere and, you know, make a name for myself in the world somewhere. Now I know better. But yeah, but it's certainly, in many other respects, astrology has been a good predictor of my behavior and my personality and my future. And I don't really know why that is. It's inconceivable to me that it's the planets sort of emitting these rays that influence people. To me, that doesn't really gel, you know, or the zodiacal signs doing the same thing. It doesn't quite sit right with me. But I do think that the signs of the zodiac and the planets, particularly the gods that the planets are named after, are powerful archetypes in the collective unconscious. And for whatever reason, you know, they have an existence all of their own, you know, and a kind of universality to them that all people understand and experience. And for whatever reason, they have become associated with this or that planet or this or that zodiacal sign. But leaving aside, you know, scientific or pseudoscientific, you might say, explanations, they certainly do exert an influence on our lives. There's just no way that something as ubiquitous and well recognized in our society as the star signs and the planets doesn't have an influence on us. It's part of our culture. You know, it's part of the cultural waters that we swim in, air that we breathe. And there have been more ridiculous ideas that become widespread that influence people's beliefs than astrology. And you don't need to look far to recognize that. So I think that whether we like to admit it or not, astrology does exert an influence on us. And whether there is something pre-existing that somehow means that for whatever reason, when we're born at a particular time of the year, or we enter a particular time of the year, certain energies start to influence us. Whether that's what's really happening or not, you know, I think there's certainly a psychological aspect to this, which is undeniably true. You know, there are all kinds of social constructs that are completely arbitrary that people adopt and fully believe that it applies to them. And Sometimes there's an explanation for that. Sometimes it's not arbitrary. Sometimes there's an explanation for that in their environment. And sometimes it's more of a choice. And so perhaps there's some element where, because we expect to act a certain way, because people tell us we should act a certain way because of what our star sign is, that we then adopt those traits. It's possible. But who knows? Who knows what the case is? But it does raise an interesting point. Considering these questions, it raises an interesting point about free will versus determinism or fatalism. And this is a part of astrology which I think doesn't really get considered quite enough. You know, it's a lot of fun to do our horoscopes and to look at what our dominant planet is and what our rising sign is and our sun and our moon is and all of that. But have we ever stopped to think whether it's a good thing that there are these external forces, call them planetary forces, call them zodiacal forces, that have such a profound influence on our lives? Would it not be better if we have more free will, more agency to decide our own destiny? And should we take it for granted that we are beholden to the stars, that we are beholden to destiny? Or can we, in fact, break the hold that fate has on us to create our own destiny and our own fate? And so these are the sorts of ideas and questions that can enter into astrology. When you look at, for example, the way different esoteric traditions consider the influence of the planets and the stars. On the one hand, you've got like the Hermeticists, who very much embrace the cosmic order, engage in theurgy to work with the planetary forces and the stellar forces very much as beneficent beings who can enrich our life. And then on the other hand, you've got like the Gnostics, who I spoke about in my last video, who believed that the influence of the stars and the planets was a kind of an oppression. It was a kind of enslavement. You know, that we should have this divine spark, which, like God, wants to be free and independent and creative, and yet is beholden to the influence of these stellar and planetary forces, which determine its behavior and determine the fate that is laid out for it. Yeah, if you want to go even deeper into it, astrology kind of begs the question, what is freedom? What does it truly mean to be free? Because we think of free will, as it's defined in Western culture, as being given a choice. You have to have this choice, this ability to choose one or the other path, and that is what makes your will free. But what about other definitions of freedom? If you think about something that is like free-flowing, like a free-flowing river rather than a dammed river or something like that, then you're talking about a river that is, it doesn't choose which direction to flow in, but there are no obstacles that stop it from following its true nature, its own innate tendencies. And so who's to say that we don't have our own innate natural traits that nature has endowed us with, and by following those natural traits without any impediment, without denying them, that is how we find freedom. We're not choosing anything, but we're having an experience of freedom. So there's different definitions of freedom. But then, of course, if there's something in your nature that is negative, that causes you a lot of pain, then suddenly, that free flowingness doesn't seem like such a positive thing, and that you don't want to be trapped in a natural tendency that is causing you nothing but suffering. And so I think in the final analysis, it is better to have that choice, to exercise that agency, and to have that kind of definition of freedom. But if there are things about our circumstances that are positive, we don't have to take an extreme view and just shun anything that we haven't chosen. Whatever life gives us, which is good, we should be grateful for it, and use it to our advantage, and use it to help ourselves, to further ourselves. And so there's no reason why we can't, if we believe in astrology. I think, look at how the, what positive conjunctions and what positive aspects and what positive positionings there are in our chart that can really help us. But when it comes to the bad, we don't have to accept it. We don't just have to accept fate. We can always change our destiny using our will. And I think that that's an important thing to remember with astrology. And it's ultimately, I think that it's not a good thing for outside forces to be able to exert too much influence over us, over the divine spark that we hold within. But we don't have to make an enemy of all creation necessarily, like some of the more extreme Gnostic groups did back in the early centuries of the Common Era. But it's very interesting. Astrology is one of those things. It's so ingrained in our culture. I think that people are kidding themselves if they think that our astrological placements have no influence on us, because how couldn't they, given how deeply ingrained they are in our culture? So on some level, I guess, I think astrology is true on some level, even if it's just an agreed upon myth, that can still take on a kind of reality of its own. We can will things into existence through our beliefs. That's the whole philosophy of magic. But let's focus on willing into existence those things which are helpful and constructive to us, and not feel like we're at the mercy of the stars. And that sentiment, I think, ironically, is very much in line with the energy of Pluto and Aquarius, which looks to overturn old and stale structures which keep us held down in a particular place in life. So that's it. That's my thoughts on astrology for this new season we've entered of Pluto being in Aquarius. I hope that you enjoyed that. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to my channel to support my work. You can also subscribe to my Odyssey account to support me there. Any comments you have, leave them down below. But thank you once again for listening, and I'll see you next time.